All right, we got Gregory Wrightstone coming up. There was some inconvenient facts for the global warming alarmists. We'll get into that. He just testified in Pennsylvania. I think it was on Monday. And they didn't treat him well. So we'll talk to him about that and where he gets his information and why the left doesn't seem to have access to it. Certainly don't acknowledge it.
It's Pat Gray Unleashed on the Blaze.
All right, we all know that catastrophic climate change is it's killing us. Now, you look out the window. That's all you have to do. That's what we've heard from, I don't know how many of these people. Hey, look out the window. So if you look out the window in Dallas, Texas today, you see a little bit of a cloud cover, and it's 61 degrees. But should it be like 30 right now?
Yeah, it's April. Yeah, it should be 30
Should be about 30. And of course, if the ocean didn't function the way it was, we all know that it would be 200 degrees hotter than it is.
Carbon emissions also trap heat. Today's report shows oceans have absorbed 90% of that heat, raising ocean temperatures by half a degree. Had all that heat gone into the atmosphere, air temperatures could have risen by more than 200 degrees.
Dang, man. Think of that.
Think of it. If the world didn't function the way it does,
right?
We'd all be dead.
That's not good.
And apparently they were surprised it functioned the way it did. But we're supposed to believe everything they say. Well, Gregory Wrightstone wrote a book called Inconvenient Facts. Really good stuff in it. The science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know. Gregory joins us on The Blaze. Gregory, welcome to The Blaze. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Pat. Great to be back on.
You testified, was that this week in Pennsylvania? To that?
Yeah, last week.
Last week.
Ago.
Okay.
But can I just, when you were talking, one of the questions I was asked, I did a 30-minute presentation, huge, and during the Q&A, one of the representatives asked me, what's the difference between weather and climate? And I kind of gave him a lighthearted response. I said, well, if you're a climate alarmist and it's 90 degrees on March 4th, that's climate. And if it's 10 degrees on March 4th, well, that's weather, right?
Excellent
we hear that
answer.
all the time.
Yes. And so true. So true.
Yeah. But it was a unique opportunity to actually sit down in a government hearing and have a full hour hearing on climate change. And heads were exploding on the Democrat side.
Oh, I know.
It's the first time a lot of these people in this room had ever heard a rational, science-based response to man-made catastrophic warming. They were taken aback. They attacked me, not what I said, not what I had to say, not the facts, the science. They attacked me as a science denier. So they couldn't assail the facts. So it's great to get that out there in that setting. And in fact, I just linked on Facebook this morning, got a response back. They turned down my ad. They rejected my ad with a link to my testimony.
Wow.
You talk about targeting, Facebook targeting. That just happened to me today.
Unbelievable. I mean,
that's not the first time you've been targeted.
No, you couple that with what Apple did with your app, where Al Gore sits on the board of directors at Apple, and you gotta, I mean, I don't know how these platforms are keeping their federal protections, because the only reason they're allowed to function without any threat from what people say on their platform, what people do on their platform, is because they're supposed to be non-biased. And when they become biased, then they lose the protection that the government provides them from people doing weird things on their platform.
Yeah.
And they're all ignoring that. And they're all, they're just banning people on the right. They're banning anybody who disagrees with the so-called consensus. Where does your app stand now on Apple? Is that just done? Have they just, is that over?
It's not over in my book. We appealed it. We rolled it out on the Pat Gray show. And we had 13. Right. I mean, we were on Glenn Beck later in the morning, but I'm sure it was the Pat Gray show that fueled the sales.
Kicked it into
we
gear.
had 13,000 sales in the next 10 days or so, or not sales, but downloads.
Right.
And then 2 weeks after that, Apple pulled it from the App Store. They said it lacked compelling content. Really? You've seen it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Mm-hmm. It is awesome. And
if you look at go to the App Store and look for climate change apps, these ones that they have and they approve, these things are like failed middle school science fair projects. Mm-hmm. Ours looks like the gold standard.
Absolutely.
So what they needed to silence me because it was too compelling.
Amazing. I love the photo that you tweeted out after your testimony the other day in Pennsylvania, because you had a bunch of colorful characters show up, and so you tweeted this photo out and said, "I was told that climate change was a serious issue by the Cat in the Hat, the Grim Reaper, a leprechaun, and a guy with a dragon on his shoulder." And you got a photo of all of these Looney Tunes standing there to protest you. Because climate change is serious, and you're not taking it serious.
I mean, how can you? It was incredible. They hurt their cause so badly. These goofballs, and everybody in that hearing was taken aback because they were expecting it had been billed as this radical science denier, and I the first thing I said when I got up was, we're increasing CO2, and CO2 is warming the atmosphere to some degree. And really, the difference between me and them is how much warming is attributable to CO2 increase.
Right.
I'll argue it's modest and greatly overwhelmed by natural forces, and I think there's a really, really, really strong component to these natural forces. That what they want your listeners to believe is that the same natural forces driving temperature since the dawn of time suddenly ceased in the 20th century. They don't recognize any naturally driven warming, and that's just, your listeners know that's not the way climate works.
It's silly. And the only way that you can be on board with their consensus, with their way of thinking, is if you believe it is man-caused, all man-caused, and catastrophic.
Yep.
When you ask them about what is catastrophic, what is the response? Do you just hear the usual, well, there's droughts and there's floods and there's tornadoes and there's hurricanes?
I haven't really gotten a response back, because my main mantra is those bad things we hear about is speculation about what might happen 30, 50, or 80 years in the future based on failed climate models.
Right.
And they go, well, they're him in the hall, and no one's disputed what I show, and what I show is what's actually happening in the earth today. Fires, droughts, intense heat waves are decreasing, not increasing. Look at these things. Things are getting better, not worse.
Wow.
Food's I see an earth that's thriving, and humanity. Earth and humanity are thriving and prospering because of warming temperatures and increasing CO2, and it ain't even close. So but you know what they did by taking this app down? It blew up. It was the number one lead story on Drudge for about a day and a half. Sales of the book skyrocketed. We were number one. Mind you, I published the book over a year ago. Within the last 2 weeks, we're number one best-selling book on Amazon in 5 different categories, including environmental policy and public policy. And so it actually backfired on what they did.
Yeah, and for those that are interested, Gregory, we are tweeting out at Pet Unleashed link to the book in the app if those would like to check it out.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I can't help you with the Apple version, but the Android link is what we just tweeted out.
Do they dispute that during, I think it was the last interglacial period, the Earth warmed, because all of this unprecedented stuff, everything is unprecedented to them. And yet we've gone up, 0.9 degrees in 100 years, 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's something on that range. Yeah, you're close.
And but didn't we go up 14 degrees in the last interglacial period?
Fahrenheit, perhaps. There was the Niels Bohr Institute had a study came out about a year ago. They looked at this last interglacial period. In case you care, it was called the Eemian period, and according to them, it was 8 degrees Celsius warmer than what our current period is. 8 degrees Celsius, and it translates into, I'm just guessing, it's around 14 degrees Fahrenheit warmer, which meant there was likely virtually little or no northern polar ice. The polar bears survived during that period with no polar ice. I don't know. It's hard. No one was around back there. We don't know how well they survived, but they did survive. And they're so this was a much warmer period. And we see the other warming periods in the past that prospered and thrived were warmer than we are today. We know that the most recent one, the medieval warm period, glaciers are receding now. If you go up to the Mendenhall Glacier in Alaska, my wife and I were up there, you can go, they're exposing full-grown trees from that warm period, medieval warm period, the stumps of those that were taken over by the glacier. Oh, wow. Well, these were fully mature forests, so it had to be a lot warmer, right?
Right.
And they're finding, our archaeologists are having a heyday now as glaciers are retreating, with villages and settlements and things that are now being exposed that were taken over by the glacial advances in the Little Ice Age. So, we know these other periods were, for crying out loud, the time of Christ, the Roman war period, they were growing citrus. The Romans, up by Hadrian's Wall in Great Britain, they can't grow citrus anywhere in Great Britain today.
And weren't there fossils of palm trees in the Arctic area at one point? Didn't we find something like that as well?
Yeah, but you have to be careful there. A lot of those fossils, because of plate tectonics, something that's in Antarctica now or someplace else, these plates drift around over hundreds of millions of years. So, we can find.
So there may not have been palm trees in the Arctic at one point.
And not at the Arctic of that time.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So, but we rotate between what are called hot house and ice house conditions, where it's really warm, and we're in an ice house condition that we're actually in a period that's unusually cold right now. And things are going to get bad at some point. I'm telling you know that. We're 11,000 years into a warming period that, it could end
at any time, right?
At any time.
It's 10 to 15,000 years usually.
Yeah, and we're a lot closer to the end than the beginning, and it's going to be horrific. And when it comes, we're going to find that Donald Trump's building his wall on the wrong border. Because there's going to be about 80 million Canadians heading south, because it's going to be, it's going to be horrific.
Yeah.
So my advice to your listeners would be to either buy another pair of mittens or some property in Costa Rica, because it's not going to be pleasant. And we'll probably, with the transportation, with moving food around, it's hard to predict what might happen, but it won't be. It's going to be ugly.
As a guy who deals in facts and put out this book that is filled with facts, how do you deal with it when they tell you that there's climate consensus on this, and that you're a crackpot for believing any different?
Yeah, I get that a lot. I spoke 3 weeks ago to the Ohio Geological Society in Columbus, Ohio. We had 45 geoscientists in the room or so. And you know what? There wasn't a 97% consensus in that room. It was a 100% consensus. Every single person in the room agreed with what I had to say. All scientists. And the big discussion after we were done in the Q&A these were all geologists. We take the big picture. And that was the big discussion we had, was as geologists, most of us agree like I do, because we see the big picture. We know that climate changes and temperature changes because that's what we're trained to do, look in the big picture. So I see this when I talk to a lot of geologic groups, and I see the same thing when I talk. Everybody's nodding their head and thanking me for saying what I'm saying. So there's I wish we could have a poll of scientists. The only one that's been done before was called the Oregon poll. 35,000 degreed scientists signed the petition, the Oregon petition,
Right.
Against combating this notion of man-made climate change, including Edward Heller, the father of the H-bomb. A lot of very famous scientists agree with me in terms of naturally driven warming and changes.
Must be frustrating then to continually hear this consensus talk and to continually be belittled as, you know, you're akin to a Holocaust denier. That's the way they try to present this, that you're that stupid, that you're that ridiculous. There's so much proof of this that it's akin to denying the Holocaust.
Well, yeah, and in the opening sentence of that ABC News affiliate in Harrisburg referred to you as climate denialist Gregory Wrightstone testified today in Harrisburg. Come off it, man.
That's an ad hominem attack, and we got into that in the Q&A part of that. One of the Democrat representatives mentioned denier, and I said I've never met a climate denier. I've never met a science denier. I said I've met a lot of skeptics like me. So once again, they need to attack the messenger, belittle the messenger. Their big thing with me is that I've never published a peer-reviewed scholarly article about climate change. And they're right, I haven't. Most of my work have been published just basic geology, mainly of the Appalachian Basin here in the east, you know, and some of it marginally deals with paleoclimate, because that's one of the aspects of what I wrote about. But that's how they belittle me. The big thing with them is I'm not peer-reviewed author. Well, I'm not, but I can use experts that are,
right,
and quote them. I'm not a fire expert. When I talk about fire, I refer to those that are. I'm not a hurricane expert, but I quote people from NOAA and NASA and EPA that are, and that's certainly legitimate to do that. And so they try and shoot the messenger instead of the message, because they can't shoot the message. It's fully scienced and documented and fact-based.
And what do you make of things like this new proposal of the Green New Deal, spending maybe $100 trillion?
Yeah. The dirty little secret is that only about, we say only, $6 to $8 trillion, this is over the first 10 years of this, is focused on energy and environment. The remaining 80 to 90 trillion dollars are focused on the social welfare programs like housing for all, affordable housing for all, guaranteed jobs at a living wage that also get full benefits, things like that are get you close to $100 trillion over 10 years. If you look at most of the Marxist proposals that have been bandied about over the last 15 or 20 years have been thrown into this thing, and it's really what it is it's a Marxist agenda masquerading as environmental policy. And even if we take a look and we got rid of all of the carbon dioxide they're proposing, it's likely, according to the magic calculator, actually we're adding that. If you've got an Android, to the app soon to have that. It's developed. We just need to add it. What it does is calculate how much temperature increase reduction you'll see by getting rid of 10, 20, 100%. If we get rid of 100% of the carbon dioxide increases in the United States, it's estimated we would reduce temperatures by 3/100 to 6/100 of a degree centigrade.
Oh my gosh!
By 2050. So yeah, less than 1/10 of a degree centigrade. If we went to 100% CO2 reduction. Well,
wow,
come on, man.
Wow.
So it not only can we not do it, but the other part is, should we do it for such a small change in temperature?
Well, if you were to ask Al Gore, who was essentially asked about this with the Paris Accord, that even if every single country that signed on, including us, if we signed back onto it and we complied completely, it still doesn't get you anywhere near where you claim we need to be. And he said,
exactly.
Well, that's true. Well, then what are you doing? He's doing it for to set an example or something? That's what they tell you. Well, we need to set the example.
Yeah, well, he's probably somewhere jetting on his private jet somewhere just burning loads of fossil fuels to get there. These people are hypocrites. What they want to do, and they have been so successful in frightening the population. It's every day it's some new scare tactic, and it's always getting worse. But yet we don't see it. We're told that it's getting worse. They tell us about, there's a flood in Maryland. It's the third 100-year flood in how many 3 decades or 2 decades or whatever. Well, then you dig into it and you find out, well, that's just not really so. There was this huge flood in 1922, and there's, what about this one in 1951? We don't talk about that. But it's like, when we try and debunk these things, it's like playing whack-a-mole. Mm-hmm. As soon as you hit them in the head and say, no, this is wrong, 3 more spring up.
Yes.
And we debunk them as soon as we can, and it gets frustrating. But I'm very, very optimistic, Pat. What I see going forward as I travel around the country, I think there's this great thirst for good, factual, unbiased information about climate change. People are thirsty for this knowledge, and that's what we're seeing.
I hope you're right.
Book sales.
Yeah.
The book sales are just
good,
exploding because we provide that. We provide that unbiased information about climate change instead with no alarmist spin. And I try and keep my the opinions out of it, but this subject it's science, but it's also political science.
Right.
And it's as much politics as it is science.
And the book, again, is Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know. And the app you can get where? Where can you get it? Because it's not available on Apple anymore.
Google Play Store if you have an Android device. Mm-hmm. And just search for Inconvenient Facts. It's awesome.
All right. Appreciate it, Gregory. We, loved the book, loved the app, and thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Let's do it again.
Okay, thank you. Gregory Wrightstone, Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know. It's loaded with fact.
It's an excellent book, and it's part of my kids' homeschool curriculum now.
Should be a part of everybody's, because you need to know these facts when you get accosted by, the climate change alarmists. The Earth is melting. Yeah, it's not. In fact, did you just see the article last week about the big glacier in Greenland that they've been so concerned with because it's receding at an alarming rate. Well, now it's growing again.
Oh.
Yeah, it's growing again.
Is this the same Greenland?
That's going to completely melt?
Right. That used to be warm enough in the medieval times to grow barley?
Yes.
Because now it's too cold to grow it there.
Right.
But it used to be, the Vikings used to farm
grow
it
barley and probably made beer out of it. So
probably.
Now it's melting to the point where Miami is going to be underwater, and you're going to be able to see fish swimming down the streets of Miami on a sunny day. So it's scary stuff.
Scary.
Mm-hmm. And yet, it doesn't matter what happens as far as the weather or climate. It just proves their point. So this is a really tough issue to win on, and he gives you all the facts you need to be able to debate this with your climate change friends. It's really good stuff.